Happy New Year, and thank you for braving the weather out there. And welcome to Children's Committee. Do I have any apologies for absence this evening, please? Okay, over our side we have Demola, and we've got Marion, the former mayor, subbing this evening. Record of the last meeting. I've got the minutes here. Did everyone have a chance to have a look? Are you okay, team, if I sign those this evening? Brilliant. Number 3 now, any urgent matters? None? Okay. And disposable pecuniary interests, please. Marion.
Thank you, Joe. I just want to disclose that I'm a chair of governance for Barnstable Primary School.
Thank you. Sharon?
I just wanted to disclose even that I'm now a trustee for Medway Parent and Carers Forum.
Snap, I am as well. Thank you for that, Sharon. Okay, that's it. Brilliant. So now it brings me to an announcement, and it's with great thanks, but also before we formally start the meeting, we need to let you know that our teacher and head teacher posts are coming to an end. And obviously, we would like to thank our great team. They've moved. Alice, Liana, Akindi, Georgina, for what they've done for our committee over the last year, but they're not here, so at least we can minute that. Thank you. And obviously, item 5, this meeting is about education, and we have a condensed presentation, PowerPoint. Thank you. Rebecca Smith.
Thank you, everybody. Good evening. So we're going to take you through a number of slides, but first of all, just to say that the report that you've had obviously identifies the annual schools performance for the year 23-24 and looks at the following areas. So listed on there are the breakdown of all the early years, Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, Key Stage 4 and 5 outcomes. I don't intend to dwell on those, but if we can move to the next slide, I'll just give you a couple of summary points before we then look at that in more detail and we can take some questions. So if we look at the early years good level of development, in essence, we have remained above national, which is pleasing to see. However, that gap obviously has narrowed over time, and we see that the gap has widened for children with special educational needs within this education phase. So that's certainly of note. If we then think about the outcomes for phonics, that's the year 1 phonics test and the year 2 phonics retest at the end of that infant phase in the primary school, we see that our performance continues to be in line with that we achieved the previous year, but then of course there is still that gap between where Medway is achieving and compared to national. So we do see, however, though, that the gap has slightly decreased in some areas within that phonic expectation. Moving on to Key Stage 2, overall, we've achieved in the combined measure of reading, writing and maths by the end of primary school, in the combined measure at the same standard as we reached last year, which again has shown some improvement, but there is still that gap to national. Into Key Stage 4, we can see that the percentage of pupils achieving a standard pass, grade 4 or above, in English and maths in Medway has decreased compared to the previous year. National also fell, but we should note that the gap with Medway to national has widened between the current and the previous year. The other point of note, just to go into in some slight detail at Key Stage 4, is that the percentage of pupils achieving a higher pass at grade 5 or above in English and maths in Medway was 44%, which was a decrease compared to the previous year. National also fell, but however, the gap between Medway and national has widened. Into Key Stage 5 now, just moving on, we can see that Medway's average point score achieved per A-level entry in 2025 decreased compared to the previous year. So that's of note for our older students there. And the average Key Stage 5 average point score at national increased. That resulted in the gap between Medway and national widening as a result of that. Looking at suspensions and exclusions, just a brief headline to note that the permanent exclusion rate in Medway's secondary school phase and at special school is higher than the national average. And this was the same for secondary schools the previous year, but different from actually for special schools. For suspensions, the suspension rate in Medway, primary, secondary and special school is higher than the national average and continuing to rise. And pupils, it's interesting to note, with SEN identified and those eligible for free school meals, white males were also most excluded during that 23 to 24 period. Okay, so those are some headlines. I'm going to pass you over now to Celia.
Thank you. So also within the education section, you have a report on the NEET position, those young people not involved in education, employment or training. To give you an overview of that, so we are seeing an increased number of NEETs. That shouldn't be news to most of you. The key contributing factors are the lack of post-16 places. We've got quite a high rate of dropout from starting in September, and there is limited capacity on training courses. As we know, children or young people having a vulnerability makes them more likely to be NEET, and therefore extending those vulnerabilities further. We have got some challenges, particularly around our level 2 offer and some of our vocational and trades offer. So whilst there is the demand in the industry for those roles, what we don't have is the capacity in our training providers and our college to deliver them, not only in the space and the resources to do so, but actually in the trained professionals and tutors who can deliver those courses. Obviously, passing English and maths at a grade 4 is a gateway to supporting particularly those young people going into level 3 post-16. And as you have heard Rebecca say, with that reducing and going down, we see more young people not able to access their sixth form. As you are aware, the college then becomes oversubscribed and is full to bursting and has no more capacity. And we don't have a huge number of alternatives and alternative training providers that used to be much more prevalent across Kent and Medway. So looking at some of the things that we are doing, obviously, one of the key things that we are trying to do is to identify and support children before they become NEET, so identifying that at risk of NEET. The IAG team do a lot of work in identifying those young people. They've taken on some targeted initiatives where they are contacting young people before they get to be 16 who they know are at high risk of being NEET. One of the most prevalent groups in that arena is young people who are electively home educated. They contribute to a significant proportion of the NEETs. We have Kent Choices live and running now. So Kent Choices is a platform where providers put their entire offer on. So young people are not just reliant on maybe the careers advice they get from their individual schools. They all have a login. It is free for them to log in, and they can see the offer across Kent and Medway. So that gives them more options to be able to reach out and apply and see what's available for them before they get to the point of the summer where they've taken their exams, and then they're looking to see what's out there. And we are growing, particularly in terms of our young people with with SEND and the HCPs, we are growing our supported employments and supported internships. We have a supported internship event at the end of this month and a NEAT conference with providers and partners in April. That's feeding into the Marmot Place work, but to bring providers together so that we can look at system-wide solutions for some of these issues. These issues obviously are not just Medway, they're a national issue that is also quite high on that agenda. That brings us to the end of the presentation, so we'll open for questions.
Thank you. Okay, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Just thank you for the report, and very, very detailed. Just a couple of questions. At Key Stage 2, our numbers have dropped this year. But one thing, obviously being involved with some of the schools over the years in Medway, one thing I have learned is that some years they're expected to drop, but this report literally compares against national and compares against previous years. Do we have the information that says, was this expected or not expected? Because if it's expected, because you know the cohort are not as bright as the previous year or brighter than the previous year, it's the numbers look a bit better. But if it's not expected, I'm just wondering if we've got that information or can get that information. With regards to suspension inclusions, higher than national average, with three establishments, because stand that Robert Napier 77.35 suspensions, Maritime Academy 73.91, then Waterfront UTC 56.45. What is being done with these schools that when you've got some of the schools are like 0.14 on the numbers? So what is being done with these schools? Because it seems to be the easy option is that let's suspend them, get them out, which potentially will then drive into your needs. Because if they're not in school, they're not getting the education and not going to get them maths and English qualifications. Thank you.
I'll start. I should have started with, obviously this is the report of the published data. So the majority of data in terms of academic is from 24-25, so the exam series that was sat in the summer. The suspensions and exclusions data is 23-24. So I'm pleased to say that there has been significant progress, but because it's so lagged in what is published, we can't put it into the report. But as you know, the amount of work that's been done, particularly across secondaries, we have seen a significant reduction in permanent exclusions. There's been changes to the FAT protocol. So that is massively improved and continues to improve. We're really pleased with that as a group of schools working together. We're seeing that come through quite well. I'll pass to Rebecca for the Key Stage 2.
Thank you. So I absolutely recognise your question, and individual schools will know their cohorts as we would well imagine, and therefore be able to say if that's the prediction. If I throw a global statement out there, and obviously it's going to be to do with where those pupils were during COVID, and then that tracking has been influenced and impacted by that. The conversations that Mellor as a group of primary head teachers will be having is very much furnished and supported by data that we give them and an analysis of their trends to be able to think about, just as you're saying, was it expected? How did it compare to the last 3-year trends? What's it looking like moving forwards? But I think also a very helpful initiative that we started last year and strengthened into this year was the Medway inclusion dashboards, which built on the data that we're sharing with all schools to show what their, for example, suspensions and exclusion rates are, so they can compare themselves to other schools and have those discussions. But similarly, of course, Key Stage 2 data broken down by subjects is also available to do the same. So it's really about having that conversations and building the system leadership amongst head teachers with our support to be able to do some analysis and think about what needs to be put in place or improved to strengthen.
Liz, then Wayne.
Thank you, and thanks very much for the presentation. I just wanted to go over the needs, and I had a bit of a computer issue a moment ago, so I couldn't access my papers. So I just wanted to sort of go back and make sure I've understood sort of the reasons with regards to sort of capacity at sort of college and what have you. Is it because of, you was talking about the English and the maths, if a young person doesn't sort of pass those subjects, they then can't, they have no sort of option to go on and do A-levels, even if that's what they wanted to do, because a sixth form provision won't take them. So really the only option is sort of is college, and there just isn't the capacity there. I mean, I think with sort of Mid-Kent College, they will sort of put young people through English and maths again. And is this not something that sixth form colleges are prepared to do or able to do? Because, you know, it might be that they're wanting to do art subjects and appreciate English and maths is very important, and it shouldn't be something that's bypassed because of that. And we want to get young people through those qualifications, but it'd be great if they could do that alongside their A-levels if needs be.
Thank you. So yes, there's nothing to stop a young person taking A-levels and resitting some GCSEs at the same time. The decision as to whether they can do that within their school is down to the individual schools who set criteria. Now, the argument, I guess, being is if you've got 5 grade 4s or 5s, then that perhaps shows that you've got the academic ability to do those A-level courses. Some sixth forms do take in level 2, and they will offer that additional English and maths. What you've got to remember, of course, is English and maths, particularly maths teachers, are in short supply, and so if they take a full sixth form that all need additional English and maths, that's another X number of maths teachers they need. So they make decisions around what is feasible to deliver, and what they see, what they think their young people are capable of. The college similarly can offer and does offer, but it's about what that offer is because of the specialist tutors to deliver it. So they have to offer English and maths if the young person hasn't achieved level 4, grade 4. They have to keep offering it until the age of 18, but quite often that would be through online learning because they don't have the staff to be able to deliver it. So there's a number of issues that are quite complicated, tied up into that. But ultimately, it's the schools or the providers that make the decisions, and they have to make them with what they have, which is why a collective effort to bring partners together and actually try and work together and maybe have a post-16 year that's a skills year before they go into year 17 and 18 in terms of in terms of their sixth form. Schools can be funded for a full 3-year sixth form now. So it might be that there's a foundation year, if you like, those kind of things. So we're looking at those ideas which are supporting that transition through, rather than let's get them to take children onto a programme that they might not be successful at if they not yet at that point.
Sorry, if I just come back on that, because I assume that with regards to, if we look at just physical places, we have enough places across Medway for sixth form students, not necessarily in, you know, if a lot want to go to college, I appreciate there isn't the capacity there. So, but it's just quite alarming that if there is enough spaces, then, you know, some of those provisions are failing our young people by not taking them on, because even if they do those 2 years and say they do something like design and technology and art or something and still don't pass their English and maths after 2 years, it's better than them not being in any education at all, isn't it? So I just feel like they should at least do something, even if they're not passing their English and maths, you know, which is, so I just wonder what sort of pressure we can put on them to ensure that children are not being turned down. You know, if they're wanting to take a place and can do other subjects, that they shouldn't be stopped from doing that because they haven't got sort of fours in certain subjects.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, all of these are questions that we are having with partners and will have within that partnership working, but also within the NEAT conference as well, and looking at that. The reality is the schools will make their own decisions. We can't compel them. You know, all bar one of our secondaries are academies. And there are other considerations as well. Do they have the space on site? Yes, we physically would have the spaces if you said, you know, each school take so-and-so, but the funding is also impacted by by the course level that a child does, whether they complete it. You then have to have the right specialist staff. If one, you know, how many courses do you offer? It's really hard to make a school sixth form financially viable. You need probably more than 200 children at least. That's kind of the recommended. And you then have to be quite tight in what you offer and how you offer it to make it financially viable. So absolutely don't disagree with anything, really good points, and those are the discussions we're having. But we have to work with the schools to enable it to be feasible for them to be able to offer these things.
Wayne.
Thank you, Jo. Happy New Year, all of you. I actually want to just touch on the points that have just been raised there, if I may. The pressures that students go through at the exam periods, and particularly when they're waiting for their GCSE results, and then not potentially realising the qualifications they needed to do to go on to the A-levels, the stress that gives them, having lived through that, or friends of people that I know have lived through that recently. I just want to know if we've got support that is out there to help them on that part, first of all. That wasn't my original question, but I just wanted to know if there was something there for them, because it's terrible for what they go through.
So yes, so there's lots of support. Obviously, every school has a responsibility to deliver that advice and guidance. I'd be surprised if young people didn't know what the entry requirements were for the particular courses. It's that a majority of them don't actually then maybe put a backup plan in, and so they've got all their eggs in one basket, as it were. So the IAG coordinators, the Information Advice and Guidance Coordinators, there's a network. We support those network meetings. We have our own IAG team who operate all through the summer. So they contact young people where there is a risk of them being NEET. They are available all through the summer for drop-ins. They have quite a high level of drop-ins and referrals, and they support those young people, advising them to where to go. So there is a lot of support. We also write to all young people, advising them of what we know and what we have available. It is the lack of available provision that lines up with what they want to do, really.
No, that's brilliant. One of the reasons I became a counsellor was because of suicide attempts and everything by young children. So hearing that is actually quite reassuring for me. But I'll go to my to the question I actually wanted to ask in relation to Key Stage 2. The report states that the average combined reading, writing and maths has decreased, while across the national it's increased. And specifically for the SEN, support in mathematics has kind of dropped off significantly, and as a result, the gap for the national average now has ballooned significantly. So are there any interventions that are being implemented to reverse that trend? And if we do know, why did the existing strategies fail to prevent this decline?
Thank you. I would just reiterate something that I know we've touched on previously, where the curriculum and the management of that is down to those individual schools. But what we do see is a fantastic evidence-based approach through many different intervention programs, curriculum plans, and certainly our trusts in Medway are very adept at devising curriculums where they know very clearly the standards that need to be met. And the tracking and the pupil progress meetings that we see in our schools are really impressive. But of course it means who isn't meeting that standard, what are we doing about it, what's the impact of that? And certainly I see that endeavour in all of our different schools, and to their absolute credit. But is it enough in terms of increasing? We're seeing that you know, we were on an increase over time, and now we've stabilised, and that gap, as you've rightly said, is widening. So the analysis at school by school and trust level is absolutely imperative at this time. So whilst it's not our direct work to go in and do that piece of work with schools, but talking with heads and understanding their strategies and understanding the impact of some of their curriculum changes, I'm heartened that that in-depth work is happening. We just have to see it come through in fruition for all of the different groups that this report obviously identifies, particularly those with special educational needs, where our eyes are very much on the progress that those students make, even if the standard for all isn't going to be where we want them to be. But the progress is absolutely imperative, and I'm confident that the head teachers and the leaders in our education schools have got their eyes on that.
No, thank you. And I think all teachers deserve medals for what they do, because they're fantastic. So thank you.
Thank you. Marion, Leah, and then Douglas and Sharon. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo. I as well want to talk about needs. I think some of the points were touched, but I also want to add some other points. Obviously, the biggest number of pupils that get into that category are SEND children. Do we have any specific post-16 options? Are there any specific options being expanded for SEND children to make them continue their education? I also noticed in the previous report that in regards to SEND children, not even one achieve a A-level grade. How do we measure grades for SEND children? Are they measured the same as normal children? Because I don't think it should be. And maybe if it's not measured that way, maybe it will stimulate them to actually continue their education later. That's my first question.
Thank you. So in terms of specific post-16 provision for children with SEND, for children with EHCPs, we have developed a number of provisions across Medway, including those additional supported internships, the number of placements at BMICS, and some expansion within our actual special schools. For children with SEND that don't have an EHCP, then they are part of the wider cohort and go in. So they largely end up, if they're not able to do A-levels, then they're ending up in the college. When you asked, apologies, about what was your second point?
How are they being graded, basically?
Oh, how are they being graded? Yes. So at the moment, yes, they are graded based on the system of everybody else. So a child or a young person with additional needs, the purpose of identifying those additional needs is to put the right support in to enable them to access education in the same way that any other child would. Only when their needs are very complex and they might perhaps need to go to a special school would you maybe look at disaggregating the data and saying, well, how do they compare to similar? We do have data in relation to how they would compare to SEN children nationally. I don't have it to hand, but Medway underperforms similar types nationally across nearly all of the sectors. In terms of the specifics around, it's very difficult because SEND is such a broad umbrella and different need types, you'd have maybe different expectations, etc. So the broad national statistic of this is what the SEND cohort achieved and this is what the Medway SEND cohort gives you a kind of temperature check on where we are, but it's not quite the same as saying this child with very specific needs we would expect to achieve here, this child we would expect to achieve here, other than the progress measures that are already inbuilt for all children.
Thank you for that. My second question is again about needs. So when you read the report, it becomes obvious that the more poor the area is, the more kids you get that don't continue their education. As well, another thing that I notice is usually kids that study from home, that home educated, don't continue their education. Do you have any plan to tackle that?
Yes, so we have got a number of plans in terms of tackling elective home education. We have done a review with the support of this forum actually to find the underlying reasons for elective home education. There are changes coming in the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill, which will mean that there will be a national register. And for some cohorts of young people, particularly those that may be experiencing vulnerabilities, parents will need our permission to electively home educate. So at the moment, we have very few leavers. We will get more leavers to address the high number and address the numbers that are electively home educated but are not appropriately electively home educated. And that will then, as you say, feed into less children or young people post 16 then being NEET. We've already got some targeted work going on. So our IAG team are already contacting our electively home educated young people that are in year 10 and 11, having conversations with them, talking about the options they have going forward, because obviously if they're electively home educated, they don't get the same careers advice and guidance that they would get if they're going to school. So that's something that our IAG team have picked up and are doing already proactively to try and reduce that number.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Leah, then Douglas.
So both of Marian's questions are sort of almost mine, so it leads quite nicely. The first one was around the SEND numbers. It does seem that at every point where we're measuring it, we're not far off of national and the gap is narrowing. But I wondered if we'd looked into the reasons, because as far as I know, our SEND cohort isn't particularly different to national. So I feel like there must be something happening here that means that we're consistent, because we were below last year as well. There must be something happening that means that that's quite consistently below national. And then I was in them both together. So my other one was around NEETs and the home education bit. Is there a chance that the reason they make up such a cohort is because at 16, I don't think you can electively home educate, can you? So are these just people who have never really wanted to engage with formal education and are just doing the same and therefore showing up in the NEET stats, if that makes sense?
So I'll answer the electively home educated one first. So well, obviously we have a duty to track all young people, even if they were electively home educated prior to that. So even if they were, say, in employment, we would have that information. So they'd need a certain amount of training embedded within it for it to count as not NEET, but we would have that information. What we're finding is a high proportion of these young people are just not, in terms of responding. They're electively home educated. They're not home educated. They're not doing anything. They're completely NEET. In terms of the disparity between the performance of young people with SEND in Medway compared to national and the difference within that, are you talking about academic outcomes or the NEET?
academic outcomes, and at each point, so it was in early years, it then basically shows up at every measurement point, is that we are below.
Thank you. So in the autumn last year, we ran an inclusion conference in partnership with our schools and education leaders. And one of the focused areas of that was looking at obviously the data that schools already have in their own schools, but more widely in Medway as well, to tackle just the issue that you're referencing there about that disparity. A really powerful part of that workshop was to look at a document called Ordinary Available Provision, which is about helping, or not helping, it's about teachers using adaptive strategies to be able to meet the needs of those SEND learners. So thinking about the way in which they're adapting the curriculum, they're targeting their questions, they're underpinning and supporting the learning strategies. And it would be true to say that we are on that journey with head teachers in Medway. We need to develop an ordinary available provision document for early years as well as for all other phases. We have one already for all other phases, but it's time to redesign it and it's time to update it. And there's a real commitment from education leaders to do that with us and in partnership. And certainly looking at the document for early years, the idea of a document for early years, because as I say, that there isn't one, that there's a commitment for us to work with our early years settings and providers and our early years phases within schools to really think about what would make the difference for those SEND learners and how we can adapt our teaching. So there is more to do there.
Sorry, do we think that that's the piece that has been, that's why we are behind national then? Is that maybe that piece hasn't been done and that's where we fix it? Is that the...
I think we're coming to a point, nationally as well as in Medway, where we're looking so closely about the performance of that group. And of course, the data does suggest that there is that work to be done. And schools will tell us as well that with the increasing levels of need that they're seeing and finding as the children are going through their schools and joining their schools, we need to be better at this.
Douglas.
Thank you very much for the report. There are a few questions I had, but thankfully they've been answered already. I've got one that's still niggling in my mind, and that's to do with the tracking, particularly around post-COVID tracking for young people. They went through a tremendous upheaval during that period. And what sort of provisions have you in place to see and monitor them after? Because some of the effects we know were immediate in terms of some of the figures, but some of the effects are going to be deferred, and society will pay the brunt of some of those outcomes because these are systemic failings. So just want to know what your ideas are in terms of following up on some of these cohorts that were affected by COVID.
Thank you. So there's a lot of work done, particularly nationally on this. Children born during COVID are now 5, 6 years old. The young people taking their GCSEs last summer will have been at the very end of primary school, so would have not necessarily had the full impact, or not seen the kind of key stage 2 results and learning. And there's a lot of tracking and learning. And when we use comparative data, it's always comparative. So we were comparing it to 2019 because that was pre-COVID data. We're now far enough past that we're comparing now year on year in terms of the comparison. What I would say is and Rebecca would possibly come in, we didn't see any more of an effect on Medway young people than we saw nationally if you look at the tracking of the data. So yes, our children were impacted, but everywhere they were impacted, and there wasn't more of an impact on Medway's children than there was everywhere else. So that's quite promising in terms of the trajectory that the young people are taking.
I would just echo the same. I'm mindful that those children who were during pandemic at home and then came through into sort of the year 2 cohort, worked their way through. We were seeing those social communication issues and speech and language difficulties. But again, that very much mirrored the national picture. So a lot of our targeted programmes, certainly with our partners from health, we're looking at just those interventions and supportive programmes for parents and other groups to target those differences. But I can't say that there was substantial evidence that in Medway that was any more profound.
Sure. Just a quick comeback to that. Thank you for that. Because there's something to be said about re-educating the educators. Because teachers too went through upheaval for COVID. They had to reskill themselves digitally. But that had an effect on the young people who are the recipients of that training. So again, what are we doing to support teachers, just in case there's another? We're living well with COVID. COVID is still there, but we're living well with COVID. What are we doing to learn lessons both from the teaching aspect of things as well as from the young people?
That's a big question. I think my immediate reaction to that would be that there have been many benefits that I'm sure everybody will relate to when we talk about, you know, virtual learning, Google platforms, Google Classrooms, remote learning platforms, but nothing can take away from that personal approach, that interaction classroom practice. So whilst we've been strengthened, we've mentioned things like the elective home educated cohort that Mid-Kent College are offering a fantastic targeted programme online to try and seduce some of those disengaged learners back into education. It's strengthened through Teams and it's strengthened through using that virtual platform. So there are many benefits there, but I think I can't answer in terms of the you know, the support that teachers are receiving post-COVID, because that would be very much, I believe, down to trusts in individual schools to think about unpacking that. I can't say that as an authority we've done something widely to be able to support that, but what we have obviously during COVID and post-COVID, when we were thinking about post-recovery groups that we convened, it was very much talking about lessons learned and the impact of addressing some of those gaps in children's learning and the strategies and the approaches that teachers were using during COVID that really benefited some of their learners, and the parenting programs as well. I think that a lot of parents did step forward and say that they found it very helpful to have some of those virtual platforms. Could they have more of that? And looking on schools' websites, I can see that the benefits have come through from COVID into what's available online for parents now.
Sure, thank you.
Right, thank you. Sharon, then Adrian.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you for the report. My computer is flashing lots of things up at me, so please, every time I try and find a bit more of information, I get another quiz come up. I'm just looking at permanent exclusions and like the vulnerable children, because they are, as like we're looking at 11 and 12-year-olds, and we're above the national average on alcohol and drug related, and also threatening behaviour against adults. And not that I'm condoning any of that, and that, you know, I'm not saying that a room exclusion shouldn't happen, but what are we doing to back that up? Because these children, and I'm surmising here, would do good with a really good role model in their life. And if they're being permanently excluded, how are we sure that they're getting access to role models? And a deeper issue, if a child of 11 or 12, I would say, is acting out like this, there's a bigger problem than education. And if they're permanently excluded, how are we doing that wraparound care around that child?
Thank you. So I will just remind you that the data is from the academic year 23-24, so we are not in that position anymore. I haven't got the full breakdown of the figures in front of me, but I have just pulled up the inclusion dashboard for the secondaries for October for this year, and we've had significantly fewer, I'm trying to do a quick math sum in my head. Yeah, sorry. We have significantly fewer permanent exclusions, and certainly so since the revised FAT protocols and the secondary heads working together, you can count them on one hand for the start of this for this academic year. That's a huge difference to where we were, and it's similar with suspensions. I also know that some of our trusts are working to put internal inclusion programs in and develop models within them to support them not having to suspend and send children off site, but to keep them on site and work with them in terms of teaching their behaviour. And some of our big trusts are doing some really good work in that. So there is a significant improvement, and I don't think what you'll find is when that delayed data is published, you'll see a significant improvement in it.
That's so glad to hear. Thank you.
I visited Victory Academy and I was really impressed, I have to say, with their personalised learning plan for some of their children and young people there. And also the relationships are so key when you're vulnerable and struggling in school. And they really took the time to know those vulnerable children with additional needs individually. And I hope that good practice is being shared because, you know, I'd like to have been in there myself when I was a child. And maybe I wouldn't have been such a pickle. Thank you. Adrian.
Thank you, Joe. And like Sharon, I was a bit concerned about the figures in paragraph 4.8 with the amount of children that have been excluded and missing from school. And you know, the question I was going to ask, are the strategies outlined in 5.3 actually working? Because there's some good strategies, but it's great to see that, yes, they are working, but I hope we're not going to rest on our laurels on this. So it's great that we've seemed to have turned the corner. That is really fantastic news. But there really is strong evidence to suggest that children who miss out on a significant amount of schooling are more likely to end up in the criminal justice system. They're more likely to end up rough sleeping, and they're more likely to end up with drug and alcohol problems. So, you know, by doing this work, I mean, there is, as Sharon said, a much bigger picture, you know, and that really is good news. So I'm pleased for that. Unfortunately, the other one that I'm a bit concerned about is the NEET situation. And nationally, I've got to be perfectly blunt here. The present government has done our young people no favours at all by the increase in the minimum wage, increasing the threshold for national insurance being taken off people's earnings, and increasing the national rate of national insurance that employers have to pay, has made a lot of our young people virtually unemployable. And you know, that is really a great shame. And if you read the financial pages of the online and the paper, they reckon there's going to be a crisis in employment later on this year. But it's not all bad news. I mean, there are things that the council can do through our procurement process. The Social Value Act allowed us to add points on for companies that were aiming to get contracts off the council. And I was wondering if there's a case for whoever's on the procurement board now to try and see if the scoring that is put for companies that are actually taking on young people as trainees or apprentices actually could be increased. Also, we did start some time ago the idea of the family firm approach to offering employment and training to our looked after children. And I just wondered, are we actually doing that? you know, could, I don't know if the Vice Chair could take this on, perhaps if we could have a paper, an informative sent round to the committee members of actually how many young people over the last couple of years have been offered employment or training to the council or indeed with Medway North. And the other thing that I wondered is there's a lot of young people that get to out of their teens, get to 20, 21, and suddenly realise that they've messed up by not working at school, skiving off. They have made a mess of their lives and are wondering what they can do about it. And I know we've done with our adult education service courses that help people, adults, to get back. I wonder if we could perhaps see if there's any more opportunities for some of these young people that are no longer of school age, but older, and who suddenly have twigged that they've got to turn their lives around, and perhaps we could give them that second chance through the adult education service. I just wondered if there's, if that's possible, and we could steer some of those young people in that direction. Thank you, Joe.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. I don't think 1 million NEETs have happened in a year and a half, I'm afraid. We are addressing it nationally. Our own MP for Strood and Rochester, or Rochester and Strood yesterday, who's the Vice Chair of the Working Party on NEETs for Parliament, is introducing Earn As You Learn, which is being rolled out, and that's going to be all parties and agencies working together. My mind is Thatcher's to blame for this, but we'll have the conversation outside of here. Celia.
Thank you. So if I go back to your starting comments around that bigger picture, absolutely, in terms of inclusion, the changes that we've seen nationally, the real focus both through inspections but also through funding and support has really moved that agenda. So young people not being in school is at the forefront of everybody's mind, even with the reforms in terms of the Family First Partnership, making educators sit at the safeguarding table, making attendance a real key factor for that, all around inclusion. So everybody is now pushing, really thankfully, in that direction. You talked about the social value in procurement. I know that it is in procurement and there were some changes recently. I don't have the full details, but absolutely it is in procurement. In terms of the family firm approach, so we haven't had a huge number of our own children coming through. Historically, we are working on that. We have a business case to look at that family firm offer, but also to increase the number of apprenticeship opportunities for young people, particularly 16 and 17-year-olds over the coming year, across all departments in the council and all the teams. And interestingly, the changes that have come in for the levy, which has restricted, so you won't be able to give apprentices to over 21-year-olds. So that amount of funding that was used to train up your own staff, you'll now have more availability for apprenticeships for young people. So we are really pushing that forward to make sure that we do as much as we can as an authority to recruit as many young apprentices as we can. I've taken on 2 myself in the last month or so. So, and adult education is absolutely working with us and is offering young people opportunities and people who want to come back and catch up where they can and where funding allows us to do that.
Yeah. Whilst, yes, if the apprenticeship levy is being used only for young people, that's good for the young people. But in some respects, it's a shame because certainly a lot of officers did take the opportunity to gain a lot more experience and qualifications at a high level for that. So I hope that we're not going to, well, we are going to try look to make sure that our older staff still have got the opportunity to increase their and improve their qualifications, because I think that did make a great deal of difference to the quality and also help with retention as well. Thank you.
Lenny, then Leah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions, but I want to start off with a wider point, really. I think there's some really great work and communication coming out of the local authority. We mentioned earlier about COVID and the impact of COVID, but I think over the last few years, working in Medway, I've seen an increase in the communication focused on trauma-informed practice and getting children into school, attendance work, safeguarding, inclusion conferences, language development, so schools can support with that more, and adaptive teaching, and then wider in Medway in terms of getting children off their screens and playing more. So I think there's been some really great work. The comments I want to make in terms of questions, we're thinking about Councillor Joy's comment at the beginning about is it expected that the decrease is going to happen because of COVID. I think we need to prepare ourselves for next year as well, because our current year 6 missed reception and year 1, whereas the last year was just year 1 and year 2. So I think we need to be prepared for that. And I've got a question just about early years. So they're above for good level development, and then through the rest of their primary education into secondary, we're below national. And it's just, and I know it can't be answered, it's just a wider point. Do you think it's more of a curriculum issue? Do you think it's more of a teach and learning issue? I think, obviously, you've said before that actually the vast majority of schools in Medway are academies, so they are responsible for the day-to-day education. But I'll just be interested to hear your views of it's above for early years and then it goes below. And my final point is just, do we need to include multiplication check results in this dashboard, or is it not necessary? Thank you.
Thanks, Lenny. In terms of the early years analysis, I couldn't agree more in terms of that headline figure we've talked about, but it's the breakdown that I know schools are looking at in individual cohorts and how that then tracks through and the impact it has. So, for example, their continuous curriculum into from early years into year 1 and possibly sometimes into year 2. That's been a pivotal change, and we've very much supported that, for recognising the useful analysis that individual schools and trusts do. I'm really excited about the Best Start in Life initiative, and we've already begun that journey in terms of looking at how we're preparing our children moving from childminders, PVI settings, and into mainstream schools or into schools. And I know that the leaders in schools are committed to being part of that work as well. We're focusing a lot on the transition and the effective transition from those preschool settings into school. That will feed into the work that schools are doing. But Best Start in Life is very much that initiative, looking at, of course, how the children perform by the end of their reception year. And we have a government target to work towards to look at that, and there needs to be a significant increase. So whilst there's a preventative agenda, very much welcomed from our colleagues in the health service, working in partnership with education, another part of that is about the quality of early years teaching. And we have Rise Improvement Advisors working from the Department for Education with all local areas to think about the webinars, to think about engaging in CPD programs to support better quality interactions, and that I don't mean that in a critical way of what's happening already. It's just improving and building on it further to enable those children to reach some of those milestones and reach the standard that we would hope for them to reach by the end of their reception year. So I think I've probably diverted a little bit from your original question, but there's lots going on and lots to come. And, you know, in terms of having we're working towards an early years partnership board as well that will work very closely to create a strategy for our early years settings in partnership with our preschool providers and our school educators, thinking about that most important group of children in our schools and in our providers. Lenny, your second question, I'm so sorry, I didn't write it down. You made a point about.
So I said about the current year 6s, we prepare ourselves for that, but my question was about a multiplication check. Do we need to include that data?
Thank you. I too have been mindful of that, and I think we need to provide some data for that. More and more schools have done an analysis of that, but I think it's not necessarily transpiring through to end of year 6 outcomes. The test, of course, is done in year 4, and then we don't see necessarily the impact of that into the year 6. But saying that, the curriculum review that we saw come out last February, was it February? It very much encouraged us all to think about transference of skills, transference of the phonics skills by the end of year 1 and 2, and into children being able to write. In the same token, we need to think carefully about the transference of the skills of the multiplication tables. It's great rote learning, but actually what are those meaning for us in our curriculum, and children being able to be really numerate and use that mathematical agility that we want to see them apply into their own learning and lives. So that's, I take your point, and yes, I welcome it.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Leah?
So mine was really quick. I missed it before when I was talking about the fact that we were under national on some of the SEND metrics. Also noticed, which is a much more positive thing, that we're quite far above national on pupils entering the English baccalaureate. So I just had a similar question around if we'd looked at why and what we were doing differently and some of that best practice work that would be.
So I don't think we've done a forensic analysis around the English baccalaureate. My sense would be because we have a selective system. So it's pretty standard in terms of grammar schools. We are higher than national in terms of the numbers that are entered for that. I think that's probably the main reason.
Thanks. Could I just ask a couple of quick things, if that's okay, just from the chair? I know these things don't just happen, but, 96.3% of our schools are outstanding and good. With that, are we confident, and I know that the academies are a barrier because obviously they don't have to work in partnership with you and Rebecca, Celia, but are we confident that we're sharing that good practice if something really brilliant is happening in literacy there, or I mentioned the behaviour at Victory Academy? Are we, and we're working with school leaders, but are those frontline staff experiencing professional development and that sharing of good practice and obviously celebrating of success? Because, as I said, these things don't happen. So obviously, a lot of our schools are so hardworking. And I not only bring that up, we're thinking of Ruth Perry, the head teacher that unfortunately was driven to take her own life. But they are stressful situations in schools nowadays.
So if I answer that first, so certainly the local head teacher networks are very proactive in working together, supporting each other, sharing good practice, trials and tribulations together. They are very supportive. They do, you're right, as academies, they might not need to engage with us, but they do. We have regular attendance at those forums and are invited into the schools to have conversations and to see the good work. Obviously we have the teaching schools that will pick up and support, and as Rebecca had referenced, DFE Rise Advisors, which will now start coming in and doing some of that direct school improvement work with academies. So yes, certainly across our academies, although there are some large academies, locally we do see some very good collaboration between the schools and sharing of those ideas, as is evidenced within certainly the reduction in exclusions, the development of inclusion practices.
Thank you. I would just add to that really in terms of our relationships with our multi-academy trusts and our small number of maintained or local authority schools. We just see that as one collective body of schools, and I think that the school-to-school support agenda is so part of our vocabulary. It's a shared vocabulary where, as you said, Jo, it needs to be celebrating the successes. And I think things like the head teacher bulletin that goes out to schools encourages within a vast array of different areas, CPD offers, celebration of best practice, being able to promote opportunities across a wide number of areas, all in favour of supporting the work that schools doing. So we've thought differently about how to communicate with schools, and you do see that coming through in those comms and those bulletins, but we're always reviewing it.
And just to thank you, all the schools that I go to visit, and I do like visiting schools, I've never heard a bad word said about you, Rebecca. It's always really good and supportive. So keep on keeping on, and thank you personally for that. Vice Chair.
I move that the committee notes the annual schools performance report as set out at Appendix 1 to the report. And I think they're both in together, so I also move that the committee notes the NEATS report too.
Lovely. And is that seconded? Thank you, Marion. And agreed? Thank you. Okay. Our next item is, can I just say congratulations, Dr. Roy Smith. You are a beacon of excellence, I think, because I just been at so many of your things, and you are just so inclusive, and you make children, you know, you make such a difference to children and families across Medway. So I just couldn't resist saying that. I hope you don't mind. So we're talking about the Medway Youth Council and the Youth Services peer review. So that's item 6 on our agenda, and over to Dr. Smith. Sorry, Andrada.
No worries. Thank you very much. I will do the introductions and then I will hand over to Roy. So this report provides an overview of the Youth Service peer review completed by the National Youth Agency in July 2025. We have invited them to complete this review, and they have offered us an earlier date that we anticipated. This was an opportunity for us to be seen as we are. We have asked the National Youth Agency to focus on 2 areas: practice and impact, and partnership during the review. We had no surprises as part of the peer review, and I am very proud of the youth service and the work that they do, and I'm sure others are as well. The peer review identified strengths such as retainment of open access to youth service, knowledge of the community and its needs, targeted provisions, and a committed political and senior leadership. The review has also identified areas which we will need to focus to strengthen our work. We thank the National Youth Agency for completing this peer review, and we welcome them back to see the progress of our work in respect of their recommendations. I take that the report has been fully read, and I will now open for questions. Thank you.
Stephen Hubbard.
Yeah. Hi, Roy. Well, I'm trying to do it's in 5.1, it talks that the recommendations will be adopted over a phase. Has that phase already started? And if not, when's it going to start? And what do you see as the phasing? That's the starter anyway.
I think that's on, yeah. The key thing for me, I mean, looking at all the recommendations, is around that overall revisiting the needs assessment, stakeholder engagement, and better mapping of all of the different elements that make up the local youth offer. Because, of course, the youth service that we deliver here, I'm incredibly proud of what we deliver as part of Medway Council, but is a part of the puzzle. That includes a great deal of other organisations in the voluntary sector, scouts, guides, cadets groups that are out there, as well as a number of charities. One of the pieces of work I'm starting at the moment, and we've got started on the initial phases of, is that initial mapping and consultation approach that we're going to be taking forward over the next year. Another part in there that we've already made some significant progress on is about working as part of children's service in terms of strengthening the participation strategy, which I think has been presented recently, and there's work going ahead about how we transform and improve participation work and strengthen that across our whole of children's services. So really from here on, I think this is the big first phase is going to be around that mapping and communication, stakeholder engagement. One, about understanding what is available so that we can better celebrate it. And secondly, to try and better understand what the different needs are that are coming from there and identifying some of the gaps in provision. Because we are very aware that there are going to be gaps. There's going to be areas where we need to think differently about provision, collaborations that can happen.
I was just thinking the interaction you have with the various academy trusts. Does that cause a problem? Do you have better relationships with one set or another set, or you're going through children's services to get to them? It's a follow-up question to the chair, really. How do you feel about relationships with diverse education providers?
Yeah, we've pretty good relationships with most schools. We work quite extensively with different schools and partnerships across the area. I mean, it was interesting listening earlier. We're working at the moment with Robert Napier and with Brompton Academy at the moment on the Youth Futures Partnership, Prevention Partnership pilot that's going on at the moment. And that's looking at, and that actually does talk to some of the things that were earlier about trying to reduce risk of exclusion and risk of entry into criminal activity. So we're also working with the Turnaround Project alongside the Youth Justice team as well, or Youth Justice Service, sorry, particularly in Maritime and Victory at the moment, and we're looking at early identification. So we've got some quite good relationships there. Obviously, we can't be in every school, and we would love to be able to be in more places at once, but we have to have limits of what we can do there. But those relationships are pretty strong. And I think that they will feed into that stakeholder engagement quite well, I believe.
I'm just thinking about in my own locality, working with community groups. I think there was outreach in the past from the Strood site into the Friends of Broom Hill, that the work on the open space, not just the park, but obviously the Friends Old Orchard. Are you looking to get into engaging with community groups that actually could provide a sense of ownership as well? Because the issues sometimes are vandalism in the parks is due to the fact that they don't feel they own it. But I feel that we've only got community groups out there, and the Friends of Broom Hill, as you know, is probably the most impressive packed community group in Medway. I'm sure that Strood would be able to reach out and engage. I know that Friends of Broom Hill would welcome that.
Always very keen to link in with those groups. We've got good partnerships. Quite often those happen and are stronger when there is a high need. For the actual stakeholder engagement, the priority groups will be those already working with other groups of young people. People like Club Awesome, organisations like the Parent and Carers Forum are going to be really integral as the first stage. But I'm always very open. Any groups that are keen to engage young people, please put them in touch with us. Very keen to talk to them. We've got a number of examples of partnership work that we've got active at all times in those different community areas.
Thank you. Leah, then Adrian.
So I just noticed that a few times, firstly, actually, I want to say I really loved the report. I thought so much of it was great. But a few times, I think the thing that came up from the young people time and time again was around that having ownership of a space, which obviously is difficult as we get rid of more and more. But I wondered if we looked at any of the existing spaces, like even the family hubs, whether there is just bits of that might be underutilised and we can just use a room of spaces that we already own and give young people something that is theirs and they can own and put their posters on the walls and just make their own. I didn't know how much work we'd already done on that.
It's a difficult one. We work in collaboration with those spaces regularly. We've got some good examples of shared space in terms of Medway libraries, also with the Children and Families Hub, particularly in Gillingham. There is a difficulty when you're trying to make a space suit everybody, that it is very hard, particularly for teenagers, for it to be so. And that's where those comments come from sometimes, unfortunately. Quite often the needs of other groups and other service users are quite often prioritised above teenagers because of legal reasons, quite often to do with health and safety legislation about very young children, for example, mean that certain things need to be put in place. So we are keen in terms of when we're working on co-design with those spaces about what we can do to protect and strengthen young people's usage of those spaces. We're also doing work with other partners to identify new spaces where we can work, particularly work around the high streets, where we're looking at trying to find new provision there. Not got all the answers at the moment, where we're always looking and seeing how we can do that. My personal view is that the space is sometimes less important than the relationship. I think that's the key element that we try and put in place. But I do identify and respond to the comments in there from some of the young people about saying they really wanted some of their own spaces, and I'm very keen to try and find ways to strengthen that.
So if I can add, I don't know if you have looked at so Moat have one at Hillyfields, and I think some of the other housing association estates have them. They're like community houses, and I wondered if maybe there was a space to use a room within one of those houses that is the youth services room. Do you know the house that I mean in Hillyfield? That's the one I can visualise. I can't think of the others, but I don't know if there's scope for it.
Yeah, we have used that one before, and we use alongside our youth centres. We use quite a lot of other community facilities. Quite often what that does enable us to do is to move around where there is need, because that does change with time. So we deliver, for example, up in Football Pavilion up in Grain, which we've been delivering for about 20 years now. A very small provision, but on a one night a week in a shared space. And we're always looking for different spaces where we can do that. But it would quite often needs to be deployed alongside where there is a need, where need is highest in terms of additional provision. So yeah, always keen to do that.
Okay, we've got Adrian, Wayne, then Douglas.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Roy. I think you and your team have been congratulated. You know, the peer review was very, very positive indeed. But it's I've got to say, it's not unexpected, because I was very, very impressed with a little while back. We had disciplinary problems in a local school that a lot of my residents, young people, attended. And I attended meetings at the school, and I've got to say, it was our youth team, 2 members that went along there, were more proactive in getting the situation sorted out than the senior management of the school. No names, no pack on that one, but I think people will know what I'm referring to. But at that stage, I was really impressed, and I've had good feedback from that since. So it's, you know, you've done a really good job consistently over a long period of time, and I hope the Vice Chair in her summing up can perhaps put some words of thanks from us as a committee, you know, to the youth service for the good work they're doing. I've got one question for you, Roy. Could you explain what the Lundy model is that is mentioned in the report, please?
Yeah, I'll do it very, very briefly, because there's a lot to it. But the Lundy model is essentially a tool for trying to identify the conditions needed for good children's participation. And arguably that could be any citizenship participation. And it talks about particularly around how you create the right spaces to make it so that young people feel like they can share. What can be done to support young people to have the skills needed to share their voice? So thinking about that circle. There'll be another circle which is thinking about the audience and how we make sure we're listening and creating good conditions for being able to not just listen, but also process what children and families are telling us. And then the fourth quadrant is about how do we make sure that that actually makes a difference, that there is an influence, and that feeds into decision making, comes into panels like this, and helps us make strategic decisions that make a difference to young people's lives. But also how we make sure then young people who've been involved find out and know what's happened because of what they've done. So I think it's a very useful tool for being able to embed participation approaches and a culture of participation in an organisation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wayne, then Douglas.
Thank you. It's a really positive report, and the peer review was actually a very good read. So thanks for that. The peer review is actually something that's come up recently within my ward, but with the discussions that are going to be happening with the development of the new of the skate park, which is going on. So actually having those users actually being an important and having an integral part of that is really, really important for us. However, and I'm going to do something that does sadden me slightly, because within the report and on page 82, it said about the workforce burnout, and it highlighted the risk of over-reliance of youth workers leading to a potential burnout, which we can ill afford with our youth workers, who, as we probably would all acknowledge, do an absolutely wonderful job and play an important function within our society. And we spoke about role models earlier this evening. These people do become very good role models to our youth. So if we can try and protect them as much as possible, let's do that. And we also then had the data collection systems, which were inadequate. There was a projected overspend, albeit it was around 15,000, I believe it was, off the top of my head. Overspend within the budget, but how will we manage the potential replacement of our data systems if we haven't got the funds there? And I think it did say in the report that it would be referred back to Cabinet, but I just want to make sure that we can update our systems within the budget means that we've currently got. And is there something that you've got thoughts on to manage that?
Yeah, first a comment on the comments around burnout. I think one of the difficulties for youth workers is that youth work but is also one of its key benefits. Youth work goes where young people are in terms of both where they are physically, but also where their needs are. And the good thing about that is it means we're very responsive to what young people's needs are. The difficult thing is it can lead to people becoming a jack of all trades, master of none, because you can get pulled into everything. You know, youth work can connect to public health, it can connect to safeguarding, it can connect to heritage, it can connect to virtually everything that the council does that happens in a community, which can lead to that. And one of the roles for myself and my managers in my service is to try and protect our staff around that, to give them the training they need and the support they need, good supervision being a vital component of that. That's an ongoing challenge, and it will be a challenge anywhere that youth work's delivered. Obviously, more resource is always welcomed, but also more resource can still find that need will still be there for that protection and making sure workers are well supervised and managed. On the data systems, where we are with that is we are looking at different potential. There is a core data system in terms of core, Mosaic, sorry, my memory going there for what it's called. Mosaic, which is used by Children's Services. I'm keen to explore how the youth service could be able to use that as a potential method of recording and take advantage of a more up-to-date and perhaps more supported system than the current IWSS system, or Core Plus as it's known, which it was created around quite historic requirements, which is one of the reasons it's a little bit difficult to use. We're able to record our data, it's there, it's secure and it's safe. I think our difficulties that it refers to is usually around reporting and analysis of that data. And that's one of the areas I'd really like to get better at, because it helps with our needs assessment, it helps with our learning from our service. So it's something, that's one of the conversations we're investigating, to trying to make that as cost neutral as possible. Yeah.
Thank you.
Lovely. Douglas and Lisa.
Thank you very much for another great report, and just big up all the youth workers. They do a fantastic job. We need more of them. Just a slight correction, first of all, and I hate to correct you because, you know, I'm a fan of your work already, but a jack of all trades, master of none, the full expression is oftentimes better than a master of one. So there's something to be said about enabling young people to who have this diverse range of skills and experiences that can work across the whole panacea of health, education, population health management, all of that, to tap into some of those resources. So there's some sort of succession planning for youth workers to combat this burnout phase. They need to know that these skills mean something somewhere else, so they can move forward. I really like this whole co-production piece, particularly for young people to feel like they are part of the solution. It gives them a sense of authorship and ownership, and that is so pivotal. When you talked about the overspend, I know it was a little. My concern was as Medway's population continues to expand, are, are you safeguarding that, that overspend amount, or do you predict actually we're going to need a bigger overspend capacity if we continue to grow the way that we're expanding? The next question is to do with the funding for some of these youth workers and organizations that work alongside. And is there any way that first and foremost, can you explain how the funding works for some of these organizations that support the youth workers? And is there any way that you can secure funding for longer periods of time? Because one thing I hear from people who do this work is the continuous begging for money every year, coming to the begging bowl. You've got no consistency, you've got no way of projecting or keeping staff for 2-3 years. And some of the data that you want to collect, it's important that you have those same people collecting that data so you get that consistency going along. I think that's about it. Thank you.
Okay, funding is a difficulty for anyone doing this sort of work across the country. We're fortunate in Medway that we've got a core funded aspect to the youth service, which is the large community funded part of the youth work that we deliver in all of our areas. That offer is augmented by a whole range of different provision in the voluntary sector, but also aspects of things that we apply for on short-term funding. I will say the funding landscape is tricky. 2 or 3 years is a good amount of funding at the moment. Quite often you're talking less than a year. Funding that will be available for a year, maybe 6 months, and that'll have a usable life of 6 months. So that is a real challenge, especially when we've got extended projects such as the one at Medway Hospital, such as projects where we've done short-term pieces of work. Some of the collaborations we're doing with the Youth Justice Service around turnaround and the Youth Futures pilots. There's a lot of pilot programme in the youth sector that comes out, doesn't really last very long, and sometimes can be quite difficult to then implement and develop the learning from those projects. We're fortunate in that because we've got that stability of a larger community service, that we're able to have a bit more resilience than some of the smaller charities that are very subject to those funding whims, but it would be foolish to pretend that that wasn't a difficulty. In terms of growth, I think one of the things we need to think about as a service is what the impact of LGA will be, how that's going to look in terms of youth services in a new version of a local authority. That's going to, I think, be a big part of shaping what that looks like going forward. I think there is going to be a need for growth. One of the things I look to at the moment and very much welcome was the National Youth Strategy that was released in December. And I'd encourage anyone who's interested to have a look at some of the things that that's saying, what it's recommending. I think there's some really useful things in there that we're working with, and we're looking at how we can learn from that and how we can integrate that into some of the stakeholder engagement and needs assessment work that we're going to be doing. I don't have answers to how we can get extra funding. We are quite, I think, skilled at bringing in additional funding, but a lot of that, unfortunately, is very short term. So I would welcome looking at and conversations about how we can increase investment from a variety of different diverse sources to be able to make that stability, to create that stability.
Roy and I and Andrada often have conversations around how we grow and develop our youth service, and we did add £200,000 into the youth service to grow it last year. So, and that's going to continue. So we regularly have those conversations and look at how we can use resources in children's social care differently, not always do what we've always done, and think about how we strengthen our earlier intervention, which our youth service provides.
Fantastic. And just one quick comeback. We need to try and to move away from this pilot-itis for young people's services, continuously piloting things to the point that nothing gets embedded. So hopefully with the new data centers, data structure, you can have quality data that you can use as leverage to maintain your service. Because at the moment, one pilot after another doesn't really bode well.
I agree, but that's the grant funding coming in. So it is for 2-3 years, and then that grant funding. And what we do is we learn from that. We think about how we use our resources differently. But when that funding ends, we'll put forward business cases if that's appropriate, and we think actually the impact's there. But because it's grant funded, that lifespan's determined for us. It's not us determining the lifespan.
And Douglas, on that point, how short-sighted are people in the council that run Kent because they've shut down or really squeezed to the bone their youth service, and for their children and young people, they can't be thinking of tomorrow. They really can't. Lisa, then Sharon.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. It's just a really quick thank you to Roy, because I think anyone that goes to some of the bigger events, we're normally there and we say hello, but they're always welcoming, and you're right, Joe, they're very inclusive at a lot of their events, and it doesn't just have to be Shine or Wednesday Squad, you know, other events that you run, you accept children with SEND, and I can only thank you for that. I think my bit was around the mapping. I think obviously we've been in the engagement strategy together. I think there's been mapping done across the council quite a few times in different areas. So I wonder how we collate that information and make sure we're using that rather than having to start again.
Yeah, the mapping it's something I don't want to spend. I want to do right, but don't want to spend so much time on you don't get to the next stage. I would want to learn from where that information already exists. I think the difficulty is it's in so many different places, because when people are mapping the youth sector, I've said quite a few times, I've been here for close to 30 years doing youth work in the community. I've got a good idea about what the local youth sector looks like, but I probably only know 70%. Yeah. And there's probably there's a lot of stuff that is hidden from me. And if I don't know about it, and then there's probably an awful lot of stuff that other people don't know about at all. So I think the more we can know, not just what's going on in the local authority, but what's going on across the voluntary sector, particularly in the faith sector, I think there's some bits there that we could be much more visible. Then we can promote that offer much more widely for everyone. And that really sort of marshals and increases not just awareness, but also access to extra provision for many more young people than we can provide for ourselves. So I think it's really key that we get that right. I'm very open to suggestions. So if someone has got a data source of information about local youth provisions sitting in their back pocket, please send it to me, because it will help. I would rather not duplicate. So absolutely, let's work together. Let's think about who's got those different bits of data. Some of that will include sports clubs, it'll faith-based youth clubs, it will be community provisions, some that don't necessarily recognise they're part of the youth sector, because some of them won't necessarily see what they do as contributing to that, but they may well be contributing a lot. And it's important to try and bring that all under an umbrella so everyone understands it.
Yeah, sorry, Joe, can I just come back? I think you're right there, right, there's quite a few that we're aware of when we've been going through, but also obviously we've got the Family Hub app that's also got stuff on it. So I wonder if that's how we kind of get it out as well.
Okay, thank you. Sharon, then Wayne.
Thanks, Joe. I'm really sorry if it seems like I'm being really rude today, because honestly, it's now just restarted and I'm looking at my phone. And I had lovely notes to talk to you about, Roy, and I don't know where they are. But I couldn't let this moment go without saying, same as Lisa, a big thank you, because we're talking about children that are not in school, and I know that sometimes the youth service pick them up, and they are role models, and the youth service was a lifeline to me for role models and just things to do, for the children to do. And I also know that Strood West is now getting a boxing club in the local church, if you want to add that to it. But yeah, from my heart, I think youth services, and we should encourage the people that are attending the youth service to do apprenticeships and get up and become workers themselves, because I think when connections and all these other things, sometimes youth service can be the first people to actually ask the young people what they want to do and how they want to go, and it not be about education all the time or where they're going to live or what's going on. So I think it's a breath of fresh air for some children as well to really open up. So I haven't really got a question, but just thank you.
I will respond to a shameless plug. Just before Christmas, I had the pleasure to be invited onto a National Youth Work podcast with one of our team, Jodie, who started off at, I think, 11 years old at Woodlands Youth Centre and is now working for us and has been for a number of years and developed a career in youth work. Really talking about her path into being a grow your own youth worker through that, which is a culture that you see repeated in the youth service of people who've come through, been supported by the youth service, but also given back as volunteers or as part-time workers, and some have made that their career as well. And she talks about that very eloquently, so I'd encourage anyone to have a look at that. I can share the details later.
I think we should get Aaron Jody to write a book and then we can give it out to everybody. It'd be good. Thank you, Roy.
Yes, thank you. And I know we lost Karen and we've got Rob, but I have known, being a foster carer for nearly 15 years, I've known the youth service through that time, really. And you seem to be able to recruit and retain staff really well. So I know when I loved reading your report. It was just, I sadly did it on Boxing Day, but that's another story. It was just a breath of fresh air. And I know there are action points as well, but, is there something that we can learn from you and your guys about recruitment and retention? Because you do, you mentioned burnout, and that's in the report as well, but you do seem to have that relationship, that tenacity, that vibe to just get to whichever level our youth are at, really. Can we bottle it?
One of the key elements in youth work is that it is a community-related provision, and I think that is one of its strengths. We've got a very dedicated, I'm very proud of the team we've got, we're a very dedicated group of people, and it's, I think, unusual in this day and age. Really, we've got a lot of people who can count that they've been here 5, 10, 15 and 20, 25 years sometimes, who are around. I think youth work does lend itself to being around for a long time, to that, to being embedded in the community. That's not uniquely a Medway thing, but it's been aided by the support we've had from senior leadership, from political support as well, to be able to maintain a strong universal provision in the community that makes a difference. So I think that combination is important. I think it's also important that the staff team support each other as well. So there's a good level of camaraderie between the team. It is challenging work. It is difficult sometimes, and people do have struggles, and hence the burnout comments and other issues that people experience. But I think there is a level of vocationality around it as well, about people feeling not just that they're doing youth work, but they're doing youth work in Medway. And that is quite often quite important to a lot of us who are in that team. We're working in our community, and that is a big part of what we do there. And that, I think that drives a little bit as well.
Thank you for that. Vice Chair.
I move that the committee notes the report and the recommendations made by the National Youth Agency peer review team, along with placing on record our admiration and thanks. And also, he's not here, but I'll speak for my 10-year-old who absolutely loves it. He won't come to a council event unless he thinks there's going to be a Nerf fight because of what he went to when the youth service were running that. So his thanks too.
Bless him. Is that seconded? Thanks, Mark. And agreed? Thank you, everybody. Okay, we're a bit ahead of time, which is lovely. And we're now over to item 7, which is the Regional Care and Cooperative Children Residential Services. And is that James that's leading on that one? Thanks, James.
Thanks, Chair. So this is a report of two halves. So the first part talks about the Regional Care Cooperative, now called Homes and Futures, and the second is just to give the committee an update on where we are on our residential care services and our plans there. So I will take the report as read, but I'll just highlight a couple of things before we open to questions. So Regional Care Cooperative, so the council agreed that we would join that along with 16 other local authorities around a year ago. There are 3 local authorities that are not currently part of that cooperative, so that's Kent, Hampshire and Slough. but all of the other local authorities are involved. So we've ensured that we've been a very present and vocal member of that regional care cooperative to ensure that Medway's voice is heard, and actually we can showcase some of the good work that we're doing and see if that can be transposed, but also look for opportunities like we've had with some of the funding for Or Even to bring some funding and finance into Medway to support our young people. It has now set up as a community interest company under the Home and Futures title to allow it some independence and to work separately but together with local authorities. And Josh McAllister is actively involved in that particular project, and he's been on some of the sort of RCC meetings that we've had in the southeast. It is one of 2 pilots nationally, so it's ourselves and Greater Manchester that are in the Regional Care Cooperative, and the report outlines some of the priorities that they'll be trying to achieve over the coming years. We've recently received their sufficiency strategy for the South East, which is very good and very much in line with what we're in the process of producing as well. So there is some tangible work that's coming out of that particular cooperative. Second part of the report just gives people an update on where we are on our residential care services. So as you all know, we opened and registered Eden House around a year ago, and that was registered as good with Ofsted. Parklands, as you will have heard in the last week as well, has also recently retained its good status with Ofsted. And the third part of the residential puzzle, it will be, is Or Even, which is a building that was owned by the council that's been out of service for a number of years, and that's where we got the £900,000 from the DfE and the RCC to be able to renovate that and make that a state-of-the-art home for children with complex needs and disabilities. That will allow us to bring 5 children back from other areas of the country where they might be educated or cared for, and allow them not only to live and educate locally, but to access their families and the support services that we can operate in Medway. That building work is currently underway and is due to finish phase 1 by the end of this financial year. The other thing, because it does link into some of the things that we've been talking about this evening, is around the residential apprenticeship programme that, again, we got some start-up funding for. Very much like Roy was talking about, it's about growing our own residential workers for the future. So we've got 3 young people who've got different kind of experiences of being in and around the care system, who are due to effectively graduate and come into full-time jobs within our residential settings later this year. And we're hoping to look to replicate that programme in the future, because it's worked really, really well. And they've had experience across a whole host of different settings across the council, and are actively doing shifts at Parklands and Eden House at the moment. The only other thing that I'd like to point out is there has been a slight change this week with regards to the alignment of our residential services. Previously, Andrada and I both shared responsible individual responsibilities, but they are all now going to be lined up together, which provides us with some continuity there. It means we can share best practice, look at how staff are trained, all of those sorts of things. So moving forward, Or Even, Eden House and Parklands will all sit within my portfolio, obviously supported by our other heads of service. So I'll leave it there for any questions and comments.
So can I go to Mark, then Wayne, please? Sorry, Adrian.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report, very, very detailed and really, really positive. I'm glad you mentioned about growing our own, and that's a really good sign with 3 coming on. Really, really good to see Eden House with the good, and I'm glad you mentioned Parklands. I visited Parklands and I was in awe of everything down there. And for the recent Ofsted report, very unsurprising on all the improvements that have come through and getting good overall, and especially with the leadership and management. And I would like us as a committee to congratulate Kelly and the team across the estate that are looking with these children. It is having them get these opportunities in Medway is life-changing for all these children. and it's something that we should celebrate and congratulate the really good teams we've got there. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I've been on a recent LGA leadership course, and people were raving about Medway. So it is nice that the word's going out, and these things do not just happen. So I appreciate Kelly looking after me this evening, but all that she and her teams do. And even at the Christmas lunch with our children in care, I met someone from James's team, for Jeanette, who was absolutely phenomenal on every level with the children that were cooking us a Christmas dinner. And that was just, you know, just melt my heart and got me in the Christmas spirit, and I'm a bit humbug. So yes, thank you for that. Wayne.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, James, and I'll echo what Mark said a moment ago. The one point, and you did touch on it actually, was this £900,000 grant. And it says within the report that it must be spent by March. And if not, the DFE may take it back. So what's the likelihood of that happening? And also, is there a plan B that exists as if we don't get to spend it yet? Because the building works only commenced in October. So I'm just wondering, is there a plan B to try and protect that 900,000?
Yeah, so we are in active discussions with DFE should that occur. At the moment, to be honest, we are on target. I mean, inclement weather at the moment doesn't help some of these things, so we've always got to factor that in. But the schedule is on target. I think we've got past some of the early stages, which, as most of you will know, are some of the things that you might find an endangered insect or a water pipe that shouldn't be there, and all of those sorts of things. So we sort of got over that bit, and the build is underway proper now. So I'm hopeful that we will spend all of that particular budget within that, but we are speaking to the DFE around the timeframes that they give around actually procuring builders and getting through and getting it all done in 12 months are really, really tight for any local authority. And there were 4 other local authorities that got funding through that scheme. So we are talking together about if there is any slight sort of delay in it, whether that can still be honoured. But I'm confident as I can be at the moment that scheduled building work is on target, and it is capital funding, so it is for the core building rather than, you know, the niceties within the house, your sofas and all of those sorts of things. So, but we're really excited about what it's going to look like. I mean, it's going to have things like a state-of-the-art hydro pool in, where it had a very old conservatory out the back. That's now going to be a brick-built building, so it can be air-conditioned and all of those sorts of things. So yeah, we're really excited. It's a bit like one of the sort of projects you see on TV where, you know, Lawrence Llewellyn-Bowen or Dion Dublin come in, and you go from this wreck of a building into something quite spectacular. So that's what we're hoping for. We've got some lovely sort of before pictures that hopefully we can bring back in a few months and show you the after ones as well.
Well, still, I'll say again, that's fantastic. So we could potentially amend that report from a major to a moderate risk on the hope. But thanks for everything, and discussions are clearly ongoing, so may they be fruitful for us. Thank you.
Wayne, if I may, can I bring Mariah in on the finance?
Hi, there's also something in what we call, without going into too much accountancy technical speak, there's something called about major compliance, you know, and if the building's up and the roof's on and we've substantially complied with the grant conditions, then they allow us to carry it over, provided you tidy it up. So substantial compliance is what we're going for.
Perfect. Even better. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks. Adrian.
Yes, thanks for the report, James. And you fully answered one of the questions, because I was wanting to know what the practical benefits were from us being a member of the RCC, and you've just explained that exceptionally well. And also the news of us growing our own care is absolutely brilliant. The other thing that's really good was the Ofsted report on Eden House. But it did take, I think, quite a long time to get Eden House up and running, and I hope we've learnt the lessons of that. So new facilities won't have that huge great time delay, because I think particularly with Eden House, our capital projects team did a brilliant job in the refurbishment of the building, and then it, through various reasons, it just lay there and it wasn't used. And I presume they were involved with the new projects as well, and because they've certainly got a really good track record. And personally, I would support more investment in this area, because we've still got far too many of our children that have got complex needs who have to go outside of Medway, which is not good for them. It's not good for their parents. I think it would be much better if we could grow more facilities here in Medway. And the thought occurs to me, I don't know whether this would work or not, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. We're just south of London, those particular things of the South London boroughs have got some of the highest property costs of practically anywhere in the world. You want to build a project in London, you have to add a couple of noughts onto everything because of is there any sort of way we could, perhaps through this new organisation, talk to some of those South London boroughs in particular, and perhaps do a joint project? We could, if they put capital funding in, and we could share the facility, because that would give them a more cost-effective option, and it would create employment opportunities and indeed facilities that our own children could use as well, because these projects are all very expensive, and there might not be another £900,000 coming our way. Let's hope that this is a success and the government will fund it more. But I'm wondering if there is, through the RCC, there is perhaps room there for joint projects for the future, because the more children that we can get, Medway children in particular, back into Medway and more cost-effective ways of giving them the needs that, giving them the facilities they need, the better. Thank you.
It's almost as if you've been in an RCC meeting, Councillor Galvin. So yeah, a lot of those discussions are happening. The RCC doesn't include London boroughs. It includes sort of everybody that sweeps from here through to Oxfordshire. So that's the sort of collaboration. One of the reasons that that's a group is to try and mitigate to a certain extent the London effect, that they have the greater buying power and all of those sorts of things. And collectively, one of the aims is that we all work together to I suppose positively influence the market and get providers to work with us across the southeast, rather than just the sort of money in London and those sorts of things. So although we're not in discussions with any London boroughs per se, we are in active discussions with other people in the RCC. So it might be our neighbouring authorities like East Sussex and those sorts of things, or other unitaries that might have similar needs to us. So your Portsmouths, your Southamptons, your Brightons, those sorts of places. There are going to be more funding streams come online, I understand, for different types of kind of residential development. So I believe there's going to be one around kind of semi-secure, one around young people with mental health needs, those sorts of things. So of course, I'll bring any of those ideas and suggestions to Kelly for consideration. But we will be actively looking at that, because being a small local authority, sometimes economies of scale says that actually it wouldn't be appropriate for us to build a really specialist provision for a certain type of young person, because we might only have 2 or 3 young people that might have that particular need, but actually shared with 1 or 2 other local authorities, that would be really helpful. So yeah, there does seem to be some more funding streams coming down in that sense, and about how we share resources, and they might want to place a young person who can't live locally with us, or vice versa, and we, rather than going through a more commercial provider, we might be paying 25% costs on top of. So we are absolutely looking at that. The timeframes question you had, there's a lot of lessons to be learned from that. I think there are quite a few things that are and were out of our control within that as well. The way that Ofsted works is that we need to have a manager in place before we can even press the button on an application. The manager needs to sign off about 94 different policies before we can do that. So there's something about how we recruit in a timely manner to do it as quickly as possible, but without jumping jumping any of the particular processes, which might mean we wouldn't get registered. My understanding is Ofsted are getting quicker at the time frames that they're coming in to register. So I think for Eden House, it was 8-9 months something from when we were like, yeah, come on, come and inspect us, to when they actually came round. So it seems to be quicker now. So I'm hoping that will come through. So yeah, there are certainly lessons learned from what we've done in other areas, but we're hoping that actually we've navigated some of those, and actually Ofsted are in a better place to come in and get us up and running.
I think Liz and I will take a vow of silence, but we're still bereft about the vicarage being closed. And I'm actually wearing earrings that my foster son, who's now 30, I picked up at the vicarage. He was quite a challenge, but they turned him around, and I continued the journey. So we'll leave that there. And next is Sharon.
Thanks, Joe. This is just a comment. I mean, just reading that Ofsted report, there was two key things about, for me. It was about the children being proud to bring their friends home. And so many times with kids in care, I'm welling up now. So many times that they don't have that. They don't feel they can. So that is such a big achievement for me. The building and everything's lovely, but that is what we need to be doing. And then the one that really broke me was the child saying that how everybody was supportive, and if they were having a wobble week, the staff just knew how to support them. And that goes back to what I started off at the beginning about behaviour happening because people don't understand the child's needs and lashing out. So if a child can actually recognise that people are building that support network around them and dealing with them when they're going through difficult times, is, for me, is just amazing. You can't do any better than that. My only criticism is that I used loads of tissues while I was reading this report. But yeah, I mean, seriously, amazing work. I can't, for me, I don't know what we have to do to get outstanding, but that to me is brilliant work. So well done, everybody who's involved in it.
Thanks. And I should probably use that opportunity to big up the staff at Eden House and at Parklands, because they're sensational staff teams. They do genuinely go way over and above. We've had young people that they might have worked with before, or we had one young person who previously worked at Eden House, and they'd put their hands up and say, right, we're going to go and speak to them, see if we can calm them down if they're in crisis. Or, one occasion we drove to the other side of the country to pick a young person up and bring them back. So yeah, I should give absolute credit for them. They're a wonderful staff team, and the young people have a really good relationship with them. And one of the things that we wanted to do at the start of this process was create an ethos where those young people always felt there was a safe place out there. They can't always come back and live there, but there was always somewhere that they could come and knock on the door and go, I'm having a bad time, or I just need to talk to somebody, and do that sort of alumni process. And I genuinely think certainly that the young people at Eden House would do that in a heartbeat now. I think our problem's going to be when they start to get to the age where they need to kind of move on. It's about how we do that as well. But yeah, the staff team are a wonderful staff team.
I mean, that is the thing, isn't it? It's a children's home, and it's about putting the word home. That home is home, and it's a safe place. I'm going to shut up now because I will stop.
Kelly.
We didn't have the opportunity to share the Parklands feedback letter within James's report, but if you get a chance, you'll need more tissues. I think what's described there is an ambitious registered manager, deputy manager and staff team for our children wanting the best, and a parent that described the intervention for her child and the family from Parklands as life-changing.
While you were speaking, Sharon, I think it was Will Gomez that says, good children behave, great children disrupt. And it's just, internal turmoil or trauma coming out, isn't it? And the way that it's being dealt with at Parklands and Eden House is a tribute to the management, to the team, and to everybody committed to do the job even better, because it's continuous improvement, which is fantastic. Okay, Vice Chair.
So, I move that the committee notes the continued engagement and membership of the Regional Care Cooperative, notes the progress and plans for the development of Medway Residential Children's Home, and again places on record congratulations and well done on the standard of delivery at Parklands and Eden House. And also I wanted to just add another little point around Eden House, and it came up in my day job, and I think something else that they do really well is that liaison between sometimes quite warring parties. I thought just the staff members that I met from Eden House through that call, I thought did that piece really well when people are really struggling with how they can advocate for their children. I thought Eden House did that really well. So to add that in there too.
Lovely. And is that seconded? Thank you, Mark. And agreed, committee? Thank you. And we're on to item 8, which is continuous improvement journey. And I'll go to Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. I'm introducing this report. Unfortunately, Rebecca Cooper, that's our head of improvements, is poorly today, so I'm taking the lead for it. So this report provides an update on the relentless approach that Children's Social Care has taken on our continuous improvement journey since we were rated good by Ofsted in 2023, and specifically over the past year, which has been, as always, a busy one for us. So during 2025, Children's Social Care has had 2 focus visits. The first one was in April 2025, focusing on children in need and those subject to child protection plans, and the most recent second focus visit, which came as a bit of surprise at the end of November 25, which focused on our children in care, and the letter detailing the findings of this will be published on Monday the 12th of January. As we talked about, we've had 3 inspections of our children's care homes in 25, 2 at Parklands and 1 at Eden, all with good outcomes, and with the most recent report being shared on and published this week. We've also invited some external reviews into children's, including our youth service and fostering service. Children's Services continuous improvement progress is overseen by the Continuous Improvement Board, which meets 3 times a year and includes our partners, and there are a number of other meetings and boards and committees where we provide regular updates around our progress that we're making. So importantly, our continuous improvement plan is dynamic and is updated as we continue to make progress. We have prioritised recruitment and retention, which is a large piece of our work in the service. And most importantly, we're continuing to ensure that children in Medway matter. So I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Okay, anybody? Oh, thank you, Adrian.
Thank you, Joe. Yes, it's good to see progress we made. I just want to focus in on staff turnover, because sitting on the fostering panel, I've noticed for the last 2 panels I've sat on, it's been very obvious that it's been difficult to find a social worker who actually was involved with either the young person or the carers. Is this just a coincidence? Because we have had a very large turnover of staff in the past, which has not been a good place to be at all. And I was hoping that had slowed down. Is it just a coincidence that was just happened with those cases that have come to the panel the last couple of times I've sat on it, or are we still finding it difficult to retain staff?
Okay. Overall, I would say our retention of staff has improved, as has our recruitment of staff. I think we have particular services at different times that have more movement than others, and currently I would say that that's happening within our fostering service. We've had some staff retiring there, and some have made the choice for their decision in respect of leaving Medway. Positively, today I've just made the last permanent recruitment within our service manager team. So now, alongside myself, heads of service, all service managers within Medway Children's Services are will be permanent positions when the last one comes in. In respect of our recruitment of social workers and practitioners, we're continuing to grow our own. Speaking as being a grow your own social worker in Medway, I know it works and we want to retain our social workers. We've really concentrated on our induction process, and the figures we were talking today in a management team was 90% of our inductions of staff are receiving positive feedback, which is a huge improvement for the service. 5 haven't gone so well, 5%, and 5% are ones we need to learn from still. So we're getting better in respect of our recruitment. We are seeing significant numbers of applications for people wanting to come to Medway. Having been involved in a number of interviews, word is out there in the social work world that Medway is a place that you want to go and work and that you're valued. One of the questions I often ask applicants is why Medway and why now? And the feedback is because actually it's a place that I've heard is where you want to work. Senior leaders want to work with you. It's a team. And so I think that that's working. We are high support and high challenge is written about in the report. And with that, people will make decisions as to whether Medway is the place that they want to be. And we'll take that challenge as and when it arises. So it could have been a it could have been a coincidence, but I know that there are some challenges currently in fostering.
Thank you. Mark, then Wayne. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. It's really, really good to see that where the focus is, and having met a number of your teams, and also being at the Foster Carers End of Year celebration and meeting a number of the our social workers that were there, as well as other staff, with a number of the social workers actually working while at the event as well, and speaking to them, that it's clear that people are proud to be working in our children's services team, and that they're in it for the long term, and they quite happily talk very positively about the team. So that gives the impression that every one of them is focused on pushing us as high and as far as we can get, and it just means that our young children and our looked after children are getting the best. And also talking to a number of the foster carers, and also understanding some of the ways where they're collaborating across foster carers as well within the team, to give that more rounded approach where children that are at home with their parents will get that additional support, and then they're starting to get that. So it's really, really good to be seeing that. And if we don't get to outstanding, it won't be for the level of effort and the high levels of expertise that we seem to have across the team. So hopefully we get there sooner rather than later, but I know that they will never stop but seeing the teams, and that's from some of the newest people within the teams, and into some of the more experienced, and also the heads of services, which very, very positive to see that. Thank you.
Can I echo that as well, Mark? Because obviously at the foster carers celebration, I was there with you, Mark. The way that the carers and the staff talked about Mockingbird and the difference it was making, but also the collegiate approach and the partnership was on every layer, really, on every level, which was really heartening. And you know, there was a real buzz about the place, and those things just don't happen. So could you feed that back to your team, because it was really inspiring being there. And you know I love a little chat, but I did manage to talk to everybody there, and I was so pleased that I did. Thank you.
Thank you both. And one of the things I do in my management team is we'll watch a section of overview and scrutiny. So I think this might be the section that I share.
That's good. And I was quite impressed with Peter's sackload of presents from foster carers as well. That was a thing of envy as well. Sorry, I digress. Wayne.
Sorry, I was just trying to formulate how I'm going to say this without trying to come across as being really cruel and nasty, because that's far from my intention.
That's okay.
Page 117 on the report, it focuses on the inspection of 2023, and it found that practices for children in need or those on protection plans remains variable and fragile. In 2025, obviously, we had the letter that was published, and it says that we're still fragile and yet to be embedded. And I'm just, without trying to be nasty, because I know how much hard work you all do, but is there a time frame where we can see it going from fragile to becoming embedded? Sorry.
A lot of that focuses on around our recruitment and retention of staff, and I think the words Ofsted talked to us about was the fragility of our workforce. Now, until we get a permanent workforce in, we have locums and we have long-term locums, which supports our practice improvement. But where we get that change and turnover of social work practitioners, you're then starting from the beginning in respect of the practice that we expect in Medway. One of the things we've introduced for all of our interim and locum staff as well is our induction into Medway. So we offer, well, we put through our interim social workers, the induction and the training that we put through our permanent workers, which will support the quality of the work that we want to see. People have to achieve that within 3 months, and if they're not getting to the point where we want them to be in respect of their practice, then we'll support them, or as I've talked about, people need to make the decision as to whether Medway is the right place for them. There is high support and there is high challenge, but really until we see that permanent workforce and that stability and the consistency, the practice will still be fragile. So yes, we're moving towards a more permanent workforce, and at the point we get nearer that is when I would expect us to see that more consistent practice and not being varied.
You're certainly going in the right direction with the 7 that you've just gone from temp to perm, and all credit to you and everyone in that team. It was just, as I say, I didn't wish to come across as nasty, but it was just one of those points I wanted to raise. But as I say, the amount of work that you all do is fantastic, and the support is phenomenal. So thank you, and to all your team as well.
Thank you, and it's important that we acknowledge that it's fragile, and that we're open, we're honest, and we're transparent around what the situation is in the service. So thanks for raising it.
And that is scrutiny, Wayne, because obviously that fragility is translating into the quality of service for our children and families. So thank you as well from me. Okay, Vice Chair. Oh, sorry, Sharon.
I just wanted a really quick comment. Is just to say I'm so proud of to be the Mockingbird. I just think it's so good. And then I got told the other day who the 3 leaders were, and then I realised that they were all people that came to me to ask whether they should foster, and I gave them to. So for me it was even that other bit of proudness for me. So well done, and thank you for taking it on, really.
And when Andrada presented the annual fostering report, I think what we learned was from our carers that initially they were concerned around the change, but actually now we've got more carers that want to be part of Mockingbird, and our aim is actually we have all Mockingbirds across Medway.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Vice Chair.
I move that we note the report, and let's throw place in thanks and congratulations on, because it's been a really positive meeting. So just say thank you to everybody.
Is that seconded? Brilliant, and agreed. Thank you. And the work programme, over to Stephanie. Thank you, Stephanie.
I will take the report as read. The only thing that I will ask is I am reaching out to all members to please support me with recruitment of parent governors as well as the head teacher post. Anybody that's in contact with any schools in Medway, please encourage them to apply, because I didn't have any applications for the head teacher post, which goes out to all schools. The recruitment for parent governors is a little bit more difficult because it only goes to maintain schools. But please do support if you can, because I will be going back out to all of them.
Okay, I'm sorry to hear that, and I'm certainly in schools next week, so I'll twist some arms if I can. Thank you. Is that seconded? Sorry. Oh,
I can't second it before I move it.
I'm trying to get home in the weather.
I did want to quickly say, when you say maintain schools, that's only St John Fisher and
5 of them. So it will be, it will go out to, it will just go to our primary schools and the secondary school maintained schools. That's just for the parent governors, but for the head teacher post goes out to all. Yeah.
okay. I move that the committee notes the report and agrees the work programme as set out at Appendix 1 to the report, subject to accepting the proposed changes outlined in italic text on Appendix 1. And that we recommend to full council to make co-optee appointment to the committee as detailed in 1.2 of the report.
Brilliant, thank you. Is that seconded? Thank you, Wayne. And is that agreed? Thank you, everybody. We finished early. Thank you to our young people, and have a safe journey home in this weather. Good night.